Last time on the WizardCast.
Well, gang, it looks like we have another mystery on our hands.
And the first thing to do is to find the person that booked Parker Harris.
And I bet that person is in that haunted village.
That haunted village? I don't want to go into the haunted village.
Too bad. This Marky snack certainly smells delicious.
Marky snack?
What's that scary creature over there?
Zoinks!
Marky-doo, where are you?
I've got to hand it to you kids. Finding that missing developer org after all these years, and you say this tied-up monster is responsible for the whole thing?
It's not a monster. Don't you recognize them, Sheriff?
Why, it's Jen Bowen.
Jinkies!
They were the ones behind it all. They used a fake Dreamforce session to hide the developer org in plain sight.
Then created the Dreamforce ghost to scare everyone away from the session.
They used these white sheets with holes cut out for costumes, and these smoke bombs to make the ghost appear and disappear.
And I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you pesky podcasters.
Well, you kids sure had it all figured out. But there's one more thing I don't understand. What does this have to do with booking Parker Harris?
Wow-wee! We forgot all about that.
Marky-roo!
Jinkies, are we ever going to find out who booked Parker Harris?
And now the conclusion of the WizardCast.
I'm Brian Kwong.
And I'm Mark Ross.
We're Salesforce experts that love talking about technology and Salesforce.
We also love humor. Doesn't mean we're actually good at it.
In the Salesforce community, I'm known as the Salesforce Wizard, likely due to me wearing a wizard hat at Salesforce events.
And I'm known as Salesforce Yoda for pretty much the same reason.
You should see the ears.
We have a passion to help educate and entertain people.
So we've joined forces to create WizardCast.
We've got tips and best practices.
We talk with interesting people.
All mixed with quote-unquote jokes and humor.
Welcome to the WizardCast.
What do you call a row of rabbits hopping away from you?
Bad sign for my garden?
No, a receding hairline. I would think you would have known that of all people, Brian.
Let's not split ends here, Mark. That's just a bald joke. I mean, it is a perfect style for this podcast.
Indeed, and that's why it was submitted to us by listener Christina Nava.
Thank you, Christina. You can submit jokes to us, too. You can email us at wizardcast@thewizardnews.com. Or if you're feeling brave and just want to hear your voice on our show, you can leave a voicemail by calling 608-492-0321. Make sure you tell us your name so we can give you credit for the jokes you deserve. Our guest this episode is a connoisseur of customer service and is passionate about making a world a better place, one day at a time. Welcome, Dr. Natalie Petouhoff.
Thank you, guys. I'm really happy to be here.
You know, first I have...
Happy.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Everybody's happy.
Happy.
And I had to bring this up because I didn't realize this until I looked at your LinkedIn profile, that you're an actual doctor. You have a PhD in engineering from the University of California, Los Angeles.
This is true. Piled high and deep.
Which... Considering...
That's what a PhD stands for, you know.
Yes.
Took me a second.
You see,
right.
I have a BS. I thought about getting an MS, and I realized I just had enough of S.
Yes.
I just have a BM.
Thank you for sharing.
Bachelor's of Music. That's what
yes.
Oh.
No, it's interesting because I really thought I wanted to teach, and I really thought I wanted to teach engineering. So when I started out going to engineering school, I never thought I'd get a master's. And then when the opportunity presented, Generous Motors, or General Motors as most people know them, had a fellowship program, and they asked me if I wanted to go to graduate school. And I was like, and you're going to pay for it? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I get to move to California, out of the snow and ice. This could be really fun. So yeah, it was kind of unplanned. It wasn't like, some people, I think, grow up thinking I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. But it was serendipitous and just kind of occurred. And I don't really use my engineering degree. I did do metallurgical engineering for about 10 years, and mostly in the car industry, and then some in aerospace. And then I found out, oh my God, I like people. I like talking to people. I should be in the people part of the business. Like, what am I doing in an engineering lab? So that's when I went to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers and some other companies where my people skills, and that's a really, like, I'm an unusual combination of right brain, left brain. I wouldn't say that I'm the smartest engineer on the planet, but I do actually have some people skills.
I'm sorry. You're like the prime candidate for the whole Office Space joke of the engineer explaining, no, I have people skills. I take the requirements from the customer because the engineers just don't understand it.
That's actually has through the years has been my role, is to actually listen to the product managers, understand what products do, regardless of what company, and then go to the customer and say, hey, what's keeping you up at night? You know, what would be great? Like, where is your bonus coming from? You know, what do you really worry about? And if I could fix it, what would that be? Understanding that business requirement, and then going back to our product engineers and saying, hey, can we do this? And then it's always interesting to try to get that information out of them, because they explain it in their terms, and then I have to be the translator. So kind of like the Rosetta Stone between the business and the engineers. So it's kind of fun.
So, Natalie, you and I first met at Midwest Streaming about a year ago. And then you invited me to join your panel at Dreamforce in 2018, talking about personal branding. And that's really what I was looking forward to having a discussion with you about, is personal branding and customer service. And before people turn off their podcast app, I'm not talking Service Cloud regarding customer service. This has really nothing to do with Salesforce tech. This is at all.
This is general customer service, servicing the customer.
Well, this is about keeping your promise. And so whatever you create, whatever you do in the world, you're basically, if you're selling something, whether it's a service or a product, you're creating a promise. And your brand is based on that promise, whether it's a personal brand or a professional brand. And so the way I look at customer service is making good on that promise. So you create a product, you provide a service, someone comes back to you and says, hey, I need help with XYZ. And in customer service, or servicing the customer, as you said, Mark, it's really about making sure that customer has what they need, is happy with what they have, and see what other questions they have. And it's really a great opportunity to build that relationship, that trusted advisor relationship, where someone really feels like that you have their back. And so that's how I see customer service. And think about the billions of customer service calls, emails, text, all the social, all the different ways that people interact with companies. And if you think about all those different interactions every single day, what if they were all fabulous? What if every single customer left feeling empowered and respected and heard and appreciated? The world would be a much different place.
I know my blood pressure would be a lot lower.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems really pie in the sky. That seems like a really big ask. How attainable is something like that?
Well, theoretically, I'll put on my PhD hat right now. Theoretically, it should be a no-brainer, because at the end of the day, we're all people. Whether you work in a company or you're a customer, we all know what it's like to be on the receiving end of buying a product or a service and then asking for a service. So I think sometimes when we're inside a company, we forget what it is to actually provide that service, and that there's a person on the other end of the phone, the text, the social interaction. And so when you start to really think about that and you start to really take it personal, then that's what I think when customer service becomes transformable. But I think what's happened in the world of customer service over the years is it's been about somebody asks a question, get them off the phone. let's use self-service so we don't really have to interact or talk to our customers. And I think that there is a place for self-service. I certainly understand, from the agent's point of view, resetting passwords. If you did that all day long, it'd be really horribly boring. But if you think about the opportunity to engage, to speak, to enroll, to appreciate someone when you're interacting with them, and I think that's part of a brand promise. So that's where we go back to this branding thing, a personal brand, a professional brand, is what is your brand's promise? And is that promise to really try to do your best to make that customer happy? And when I worked as an engineer, some of the things, so I'll tell you a story. This is kind of telling on the car company that I worked for, but so they came to me and I was a corrosion specialist. That's kind of metallurgy's the physics of metals. And so the CFO came to me and said, hey, we're thinking about not doing two-sided galvanizing, which is galvanizing is the layer that you put on before you put paint on.
Right, to help prevent the corrosiveness.
Yes, to help prevent that corrosiveness. So they said, well, we're looking at ways to reduce the cost in the cars. And so one of the things we're thinking about is maybe only doing one-sided galvanized. What do you think about that? And I said, well, I think you're going to have rust. And they said, well, could you do some tests so we can kind of see? So we had this whole discussion. I set up parameters and testing facility, and we tested it. And lo and behold, guess what happened?
You had rust?
We had rust. It didn't take a PhD to figure that out. But anyway.
It's on the inside, Natalie. No one's going to see it.
Well, but see, I grew up in Detroit, Motor City, and there what you see is that there's so much salt and ice on the roads that it doesn't just stay on the inside, it actually rusts all the way through.
Goes up into the wheel well, into the chassis, and
it's like a mess. So we got the results and we came back to the executives and they said, well, what were your findings? And I said, well, we'll probably have rust, like 98% chance. And so they said, well, so I said, what are you guys going to do? And they said, well, we think we're going to go with one-sided galvanizing anyway. And I'm like, what? Wait. The data says you're going to have holes in the car door. And they said, yeah, we know, but nobody really brings back their cars for holes in the car door, at least not now. And I said,
well, that's because it's been double galvanized.
I know, right? You can follow my logic. So I said, well, that's interesting, but I think that because we have two-sided galvanizing, blah, blah, blah. So then they said, well, we really need to cut costs, so that's the decision that we're going to go with. And I said, well, wait a minute here. I said, what about all the cars that are going to be driving around Detroit with the hole in the side of the car? Like, that's going to affect the brand. And he looked me square in the eye, and he said, Nat, you're an engineer. What do you care about the brand?
Ooh.
And I was a very young, impressionable engineer, and I was like, what do you mean? Why do I care about the brand? Why am I worried about this? Why aren't you worried about this? Like, I could barely speak, just like now. It's still choking me up. It's like, why aren't you worried about this? And so I think that, sometimes the fish sinks most at the head, which means that it's a leadership decision to make those brand promises and to decide that you're actually going to have in place the processes, the people, the technology, and the money to be able to make good on the promise that you made to the customer. And the unspoken promise is you're going to have a car without holes in the sides of the door.
Right. And I love that you brought up unspoken promise, because I know with my challenge, I got a company brand because I work for a company, and then I have my personal brand. Some people might notice I have a wizard theme. Thanks, Mark.
What? Yeah. You have what?
Oh, yeah, wizard theme, because I wear the hat and
I've never seen
it.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting and listening to you and thinking, well, I haven't made any promises. But in fact, I had. And so it was one of those things that it's the unspoken promise. It's not like the words that I have literally said, I promise to you that I will ... Right? I put a whole bunch of content out there. I've made all these presentations and all that other thing. And when I had to sit down and think about it, it was, no, there is an inherent promise in creating content and doing the presentations. And that's that the content is at a certain quality and it has accuracy. And if there's a mistake, that I'm going to own up to and make corrections to it. And that was my challenge. And I can imagine that most people, especially when they're thinking about their customer service, for them is what promises I have made. Well, I haven't made any promise. I just have a job. I don't have a personal brand. I don't wear a wizard hat everywhere I go.
Right.
One could argue that anytime you do anything, that it theoretically may involve an unspoken promise, because if nothing else, you're establishing a pattern, and we as human beings are always programmed to read patterns, right? So when you, if say you were, let's say you're a Salesforce admin, because I got to bring it back, and you get a request from somebody in your company, a user, to set something up, and you're like, well, you know what? I'll just go ahead. It's quick. It's simple. I won't make them go through the normal case submission process.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that required checkbox.
Indeed. And then you just go ahead and do it. Well, the next time they're going to ask for something bigger, and then you're going to say, well, I need you to go through the process. You didn't make me do that before. So you made an unspoken promise. Your innocuous, very helpful action still was an unspoken promise.
Or it sets up. So one of the things I learned, so I've had many careers, many iterations of Natalie. And so that was my engineering story. So if you look at consulting, one of the things I learned there was managing expectations. And it really was about expectation setting and then making good on whatever that expectation setting was. Or if things change for whatever reason, and things are always changing, being able to have the difficult conversation to say, hey, I know I said X, and I know that we promised you this, spoken or unspoken, but here's the current day situation, and I want to talk to you about what we can do with the parameters that we currently have. And I think those are some of the hardest conversations, especially in corporate America, because we're not always genuine and authentic in how we communicate. And sometimes I think we just kind of run over what we think we said or what we think we did. And we don't necessarily realize that we're moving so fast. And one of my philosophies is sometimes you have to slow down to go fast. And so sometimes it's better to, when things go sideways, to slow down, take a moment, have that frank conversation, and then reestablish what is possible, because things do change. So I agree with you. There's a lot of times where we do, somebody make a request and we'll kind of cut corners, or we won't actually follow the rules. And the next time we've set up a set of expectations, right? And now people are expecting, well, you did that last time. And, there's customers that you really should fire, honestly, that are always trying to get something more than they really should be getting. They're not really fair to the company. So there's that side of the equation. But I think a lot of this is really looking at, if I was to treat you, Brian or Mark, as another human being on the planet that I actually cared about, and that I was, how can I say this? If I saw you on a day-to-day basis, I'd feel more personal responsibility to make good on those expectations. But let's say I'm a customer service agent, and I'm sitting in a call center with another 2,000 people, and somebody dials my number or sends me a text. I can't see that person. I'm probably never going to talk to them again. So that's where, Brian, that personal brand comes in, is who are you? What do you stand for? And can you back that up with the service that you provide? And I think that's where that personal responsibility, personally owning who you are and what you're about, and really delivering on those expectations. And I think this is where a lot of people, if you notice that you're in a job and you have a lot of stress, some of that stress comes from wanting to do the right thing and not really being allowed to do it, or having constraints or what seems like constraints.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's having those internal conversations about, hey, you know, we kind of did promise this customer this, you know, let's see what we can do here. And so again, that goes back to the top of the food chain, is how is someone running the business? How are we setting expectations internally with our employees? Are we authentic? Are we transparent? Is it psychologically safe to raise our hand and say, you know, I'm not really sure about this, or what about that? Or, you know, we told this customer this, but we did that. So there's this internal culture about how we structure our brand promise internally to ourselves and that expectation. And then how do we carry that out in the external world?
And there's a lot of, I don't know what the word is. I don't know if this is a word, intentionality, being intentional, right? Like you have to have that intention when you're doing that. And I as opposed to just throwing the buzzword around. In other words, you have to really have thought, like, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it.
So Natalie, I got a question regarding the personal branding and who you are and things like that. I mean, when you started talking about it, it almost sounded like people need to come up with mission statements for themselves. Would you have people take it that far to actually think about who they want to be, or how they want to be providing the output of their job or whatever they're doing, by actually writing a mission statement?
Brian, I think that's a really brilliant idea.
I got brilliant by a doctor. I gotta put that in my calendar.
I think that's actually a really good idea. And here's why. Because it's our North Compass, right? It reminds us, I mean, and everybody gets frustrated. Everybody loses patience. Everybody has long days. So we sometimes need like a little reminder of who we are and who we're going to be in the world, and how are we going to incur. And I really like, Mark, that intentionality, because it is being extremely conscious and extremely intentional about who we are and how we're showing up. And so part of making those choices is, I don't think that people necessarily wake up and they have like their goals for the year. Like, you actually have to sit down and think about, what are my goals? And then what, you know, are they SMART goals? Are they realistic? What do I need to do? And I think the same thing for a mission statement is really looking at, who am I and how am I going to conduct myself, and who am I going to be and how am I going to show up? And I think really good companies actually have mission statements for the whole company, and then each group within a company would then come up with their mission statement, and then they would make that part of each person's personal brand. Like, how can I contribute to that greater good that we're trying to do here on the planet? Whether it's, you know, and even if your company doesn't necessarily do something that's directly related to, you know, like cleaning up the devastation from the recent storms or hurricanes or fires or all the things, like, if that's not like your job, but if your job is just you're selling a widget, you still want a mission statement, because behind that product or service that you're offering, there's expectations that need to be met. And the question is, how are you going to deliver that? And how do you know what your North Star is unless you're really intentional about it?
I'm smirking a little bit, not because I don't think what you're saying is awesome. It is, but all I can think about is, if I was a Bond villain, what would my mission statement be? Since obviously my objective is not to do good in the world.
Well, maybe their mission statement is to do bad in the world, right? And then they're staying true to that. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because and I live in kind of a fantasy world where I think everybody should be good and be kind and do the right thing. And we live in a world that doesn't always look like that. So from my own personal point of view, what I try to do is really think about who am I, what am I bringing to the table, how am I behaving, and am I really showing up the way that I want to show up? And I think that's a personal choice. And so I hope that people who've stayed tuned, because this is an untraditional podcast, right? We're talking about personal branding and customer service and keeping your promise and all these things. You know, it's really about kind of self-reflecting on who you are and who do you want to be. And so who are you, like maybe you work in like some gigantic company, you know, maybe there's 2,000 people, maybe there's 50,000 people, maybe there's 300,000 people. And it can seem like you as one person might not make a difference. But if you think about if every single person in that company took personal responsibility to be intentional, as Mark has said, and as Brian has said, create that mission statement, whether you sit down and write it or whether you kind of just have a little conversation and self-reflection with yourself. What if every single person in that company did that? Then think about how different the culture would be. And the truth about companies is they don't really leave companies. They leave cultures. They leave managers. They leave the work situation. And so, like, I'm thinking about the future of work, the future of customer service. As a futurist, I'm thinking it's really time for a change. Like, seriously, I think we need to change. Because I think there's a lot of people who are disillusioned by working in corporate America, small or large companies. I think people are disappointed. I think it's getting tougher and people are more frustrated. And so if I was the head of a company, I was an employer, I'd be really thinking about, do I want to lose these really talented people, or do I really want to be intentional about how I create a culture, how I empower them, how I encourage them? And so I think these are things that one of the things that is really cool about social media is there's nowhere to hide. And so if you aren't keeping your promise as a brand, it comes out. People find out. Like in the old days, you'd have to have some big investigation, things would get covered up, but it's now very public. And I think that's one of the best things about social media is it's required us to be much more conscious and much more transparent.
I'm struggling here to try to put my thoughts in words, because I had a recent experience, and I'm not going to name the particular airline. Not that if anyone who didn't look up my Twitter figured it out. Was, but... and I was genuinely PO'd. I mean, I spent over an hour on the phone trying to get things resolved, and you know all this wonderful stuff. And someone, when I was complaining about it, someone told me just go on Twitter and complain about it, because you'll get a faster response. Mm-hmm.
That's
which,
right.
On one hand, is good that I'm going to get a faster response. On the other hand, it's bad because
it's sad.
It's sad because I'm like, I should not have to go to a social media site to make it go publicly shame a company to say, look what you're doing to make me feel like I'm being screwed. Fix this. Right.
But that's the only way for them to be conscious is when you expose them in the transparency and that exposure, that public exposure. And so this is what I'm talking about. It goes back to that root issue of if a company is intentional about doing the right thing, then you wouldn't have to do that. But if the intention is not there, then you have to embarrass them into doing the right thing.
Right.
Now, consider yourself a CEO or a COO. What would you rather have? What would you, if you're the leader of a company, what would you guys rather have? A company that needs to be embarrassed into doing the right thing or doing the right thing?
Well, here's what I got to say to that, okay? Is I know right now where I am, I know exactly what my response is. However, from a CEO's perspective, a smart CEO, I think I know what my response is. But I don't think when we get to those levels that especially in this country, we're not, the incentives to choose which way you go aren't aligned with the way we ideally want to go. right? We all want to say, hey, we don't want to be that company that has to be embarrassed to do the right thing. But
we say that, and yet it happens hundreds of thousands of times.
But if you get
every
millions and millions of dollars
day
for cutting, that one dime or whatever the case may be across the entire, a multi-billion-dollar company and saving tons of money, you're incentivized to cut the dime. You're incentivized to only galvanize one side. Right. And I think that's part of the challenge for a lot of folks who are not at that top level is they want to do the right thing, but they can see that the incentives to do the right thing are just not there.
Right. And I think that goes back to leadership again, is why aren't the incentives to do the right thing there? Why isn't that baked into the culture? And some of it in customer service, so if you look back historically, when customer service first started, people would write letters, right? And there would be people probably in the basement answering the letters. And then someone came up with the idea of, well, if we put a whole bunch of phones in a room, and we came up with this thing called CTI, which is computer telephony integration. So connecting a phone to a computer, to a headset, and to a 1-800 number, and people could call in and you could have a record of that. Then people got the idea of, we could answer these people's questions on the phone. And part of what happened historically is that customer service or providing that service was seen as a cost of doing business. Instead of seeing it as a revenue generator, instead of seeing it as customer lifetime value, instead of seeing it as the way that you build trust, which is why people buy, right? So historically, what's happened to many customer service professionals is that they have been told to do more with less. So they're stuck kind of between a rock and a hard place. So I don't want to put the blame on customer service professionals or even the agents, because they have a job to do. They're given certain parameters to do that job within. And then depending on the company and how forward-thinking the company is, you get what you get. And so the only thing that I can say is that if you work for a company that doesn't keep their promise, why are you still there? Because at the end of the day, when we stay at a company that doesn't keep their brand promise to their employees and to their customers, we're part of the problem. And yes, I know everybody has mortgages and kids and college, and maybe I want to buy a boat. I mean,
well, how long did you stay at the car company after the single-site galvanize issue when they decided to do it anyways?
Not too much longer, because, and that was really shocking to me, because in engineering school, a lot of the decisions that you make as an engineer, so let's say like this is more structural engineer, but if you build a bridge and the bridge falls down, it's the engineer's fault. So you're supposed to not lie about how you poured the concrete. You're not supposed to lie about the rebarb. You're not supposed to lie about, did you reinforce it, in a certain way. So there are rules to the game, especially in engineering, to make sure that something actually does what you said it was going to do. And so for me, you go through that curriculum, you're kind of taught a set of ethics, and then you come into a company and that company says, we don't really care about those ethics because we care about the bottom line. And my response back to them was, how else can we make revenue? Right? So there's two ways to make money in a company: cut costs, increase revenue. I mean, that's really all there is. And so cutting costs at some point, and I'm not saying there isn't fat to be cut out of most companies, because there probably is waste. So you can look at that and you can trim some things, but you can cut costs to the point where you actually hurt the company. You hurt the employees, you hurt the customers. And so rather than focusing on customer service as a cost center, what I would suggest is that most companies start to think about, that's the place where you talk to your customers every single day. So why wouldn't you be like amazing and smart and kind and generous, because at the end of the day, that's where you're going to get your customer lifetime value from. And customer lifetime value simply means you ask a customer, would you buy from us tomorrow? Hopefully the answer is yes. And then the next question is, would you spend more with us? And then the next question is, and this is where you'd want to go, would you buy from us over a long period of time? And that's how you calculate customer lifetime value. So if you sell one widget to somebody and they never come back, that's not a customer for life. That's not a customer that you're actually going to make a lot of profit from, because you probably spent a whole bunch of money in a marketing acquisition. So if you start to really look at this idea of what is that customer lifetime value and how are we going to make good on the promise of making them happy within reason, right? Now we have to start to look at how are we running our company? Are we running our company to cut costs? Are we running our company to grow, to gain new customers, to keep the customers that we currently have, to get our customers so excited about what we offer and what we provide that they come back, they want to buy more, and they want to buy more for the rest of their life. And that's really, if I was running a company, that's what my goal would be. My goal would be lifetime customer value, lifetime customers. And you do that by providing great products, great services, and then when people have issues, you have their back. Or not. Or not. And then, I think one of the things that has happened is that in the past, so when I used to do a lot of call center work, I would actually take calls from the call center, some of the worst calls, and I would play them for the CEO or the COO. And they would say, oh, well, that's probably just one call. And I'm like, well, no, there's 30 more. Would you like to listen to them all today? And they're like, well, we can listen to a couple more. And I would pick the first one to be not the worst. They would increasingly get worse. Okay, now we got your point here. So then I would say, why would you want to do this on purpose? Why would you intentionally want to make your customers upset? Right? And I don't think that people who are running companies are actually thinking about, unless they sit in the call center, unless they go out and they meet customers and they talk to them, that they understand the impact that they're actually having on their customers as a result of how they're treating them in that customer service expectation and setting. And the thing I love about social is that when you have a bad experience and you put it out there in the universe, in social, for all your friends and family to see, that word of mouth has an effect. And so one of the interesting stats is that since the year 2000, 52% of the Fortune 500 are gone.
Oh, really?
Gone. Bye-bye. Don't exist.
How much of that was .com burst?
Some of it was .com burst. Some of it was mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
And some of it was things like Tower Records or Circuit City and Blockbuster Video kind of messed up there. I mean, on my blog, I have a whole blog post because I did some social media monitoring. And when we were looking at what happened with Netflix and what happened with Blockbuster, is that if you were doing social media monitoring in the film rental business, what you could see when people were complaining about that particular topic is you see keywords that come up. And one of the things was people hated late fees.
Mm-hmm.
And so if Blockbuster had been doing social media monitoring, they would have seen that people hated their late fees. And so when Netflix came along and they provided a different way to get your film, then people weren't having to deal with these late fees. And that's part of what put Blockbuster out of business, was that they weren't really looking at what the customer was saying, what the customer was upset about. And so that goes back to, and I don't wish for any company to have to go through such a horrific experience as to go out of business or to have a dip in their business. Like, I don't wish that on any company. But sometimes I think it takes people in leadership positions to see that their customers are so unhappy to have a company that they work for go out of business because the service that they provided was so bad, for them to become conscious enough to understand that it does matter, that word of mouth does matter, and that if you don't listen to your customers will vote with their feet or their mouths.
Or both.
Or both.
Generally speaking, any given customer service call probably going to be about one of two things, either about service or about financial, right?
Well, it could be, I don't understand my bill. Why is my bill so high?
Right. I'm
my
kind of
service,
lumping that in with the financial, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and obviously there are going to be some circumstances that are, you can't do a whole lot for. Like, for example, I used to work at a Time Warner cable call center.
Oh, you were an evil person.
Well, when a person calls in asking you to write off the $500 box that they never returned, you can't really do anything about that. But a lot of businesses, they have a kind of a stance of, it's almost a hardline stance. It's almost a don't give anything to the customer that they didn't, that it wasn't a mistake, or anything, as opposed to, making it right. As opposed to, we had some service outage, so here's a somewhat significant refund. Is there kind of a prevailing idea in businesses that if they give the customer an inch, that they'll try to take a mile? Or why is it that they're so resistant, that businesses can be so resistant to this?
Very good question, Mark. So one of the things is, if you're running the contact center or customer service as a cost center, then every single time you make an exception or you give something away, you've cost the business some money. So that's one way of looking at that. On the other hand, let's say that someone does have a legitimate issue, like an outage. I mean, not returning the $500 box. And that goes back to setting up the expectations with the customer in the first place, is really explaining to them, yes, we're handing you this box and we're not charging you anything for this $500 box. But if you don't return it when you move, you will see a charge, right? And making sure that customers truly understand, right? Because we just kind of think, oh yeah, we're getting
buried
a cable,
in the terms and agreements.
And who reads those? But there's a person behind the counter who is, when I've gone into Time Warner or Spectrum or wherever, when I go to pick stuff up, who could really spend another 30 seconds really getting me to understand that, or the guy, or gal that's coming out to install it, taking that time to really set those expectations so that long-term down the road, you don't have that issue. So now let's go back to what Mark was saying, is part of the resistance for giving people something is the mentality of, if I give them something, then they're going to call back and they're going to give, they're going to ask for more and more and more and more and more, and it'll never stop. The truth about call centers is that people who do that, they're actually on a list. And they're on a list.
Like the picture at the store, it says, "Do not serve."
Yes, do not serve or spit in their food. No, I'm just kidding. So what happens is those people get flagged. And if you call in all the time and you ask for more and more and more, those people get flagged. And I'm really close to a couple people who've worked at like DirecTV and other companies like that. And they have actually fired customers and just said, look, this is the 32nd time that you've called in to ask for a refund. And our limit is 10, and we're not going to do that. I think the other piece of that is that there are customers who want to take advantage, right? And so you have to have some rules and expectations about how you're going to handle those people who want to take advantage of things. On the other hand, I think if you start to think about customer lifetime value and word of mouth as a pervasive way of doing business, and you realize if you give somebody $10 off their bill, they're going to be really happy. And they're going to tell their friends, I called the cable company or the internet company today, and the lady was so nice, or the guy was so nice, and they were actually helpful, and they gave me a discount, and I feel really good about that company. I think I'm going to stick with them. Like, you have a warm feeling about how you were treated and that you were respected and heard. And so I think if you start to have the attitude that you can really treat people with human dignity and kindness, that is actually a good thing for your business. Because at the end of the day, what is that word of mouth story at the campfire, at the cocktail party, at the conference? People tell those stories all day long. What story do you want people to be telling about your company?
Or about you?
Or about you as a customer service agent or as a leader. And so,
or somebody with a personal brand.
Or somebody with a personal brand, exactly. And there are agents who answer questions in the social sphere, right, that have personal brands. One of the people that started that was Frank Eliason, when he was running a contact center at Comcast. And he had a personal brand, and he made it his personal mission to really try to help every single customer that reached out, and his whole team had that same personal brand. They would sign their tweets, Bob at Comcast or whoever it was, and people took personal responsibility for providing a great experience. So if you're one of those people who is listening to this and you feel really passionate about this, then you need to align yourself with a company that allows you to do this. If you are that kind of person and you truly care and you want things to be different, and you're in a company who principally does not have those values, you will daily find yourself frustrated and be upset and probably really stressed. And so at that point, you have to really start to do some self-reflection and ask yourself, is this really where I should be? And think about, like, this is a kind of a mind experiment. For those companies that have crappy policies, that treat their employees not so nicely and treat their customers worse, what if all the customers left? And what if all the employees left? No people, no business.
Right.
It's really that simple. So I see this as taking personal responsibility and taking a stand for who you want to be in the world, how you want to show up, and how you want to show up inside that company, and aligning yourself with people and companies and brands that align with your own personal values.
And if you are a company or a person that aligns with those values, and you're memorable, people remember you. I still remember, I was renamed nameless. I was very, very frustrated with a certain tech company that everyone in this podcast knows. And I finally reached out to someone, and he completely solved my problems and went above and beyond that. And to this day, we still try to meet each other at Dreamforce, just to say hi, how you doing? And so, by the way, Gavin, if you're listening, hi. And I'm never going to forget that. And so, if Gavin goes off and moves to a different company or something like that, I'm going to go, well, Gavin's working at that company. That company must be doing something right. I'm more likely to go, I want to know more about that company, what they do, because I know someone who has that integrity and has the willingness to put that step forward is willing to work there.
Right. And so that's one of the things that I think a lot of leaders don't understand about that personal professional brand, is that when you have evangelists or you have people who do go the extra mile and do make those remarkable and memorable experiences, and when that person or people leave and they go to another company, that is actually a statement about that company, and it's a statement about the company that they went to. And so, not to create a revolution here, but why not? What if we all took a stand? What if we all started telling the truth about how we feel? What if we all started working with our feet or our mouses and really, we can debate the idea of customer service, good or bad. We can debate the idea of revenue or profits and cutting costs. We can debate all this stuff. At the end of the day, I think it's up to us as employees, as customers, to make those personal choices and be in alignment with our souls and our consciousness. And if we all did that, then these bad companies would go away, these bad experiences would go away, and the good ones would be like supreme and the ones that would be most predominant.
We're pretty much at the end of the time. So thank you very much for coming on to the WizardCast. If people want to reach out to you and talk to you more about customer service, where can they find you?
I am on Twitter at Dr Natalie or Dr Natalie. That's probably the best place. That's where I am most of the time. Of course, you can always find me on LinkedIn or my blog, Dr Natalie News. But yeah, hit me up on Twitter. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. And
yeah, I want to hear what mission statements people come up for themselves. Yeah.
Right? I mean, it would be really cool. So if you're out there listening, Mark, Brian, and I, what we would love to do is we would love to hear some of your mission statements. We want to hear what you stand for, where your integrity is. How do you feel about this topic, right? Do you think like the things I'm saying are pie in the sky, or are you in alignment with that? And what are you doing on a daily basis to make that come true? Because if the three of us did it, that's a drop in the ocean. But if all the people that we knew that are listening, if we all got together and we all did this, we would start that revolution that I'm talking about. And I think that's really what's happening with this industrial revolution, this IoT revolution, the connected device revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, is we are in a time of transparency, and the need for being genuine and authentic has never been greater than ever before. And we have the tools to do it. We have the technology to do it. I think the people part just needs to catch up.
I feel like we need a hashtag.
I think a hashtag would be fabulous.
So what would be a good hashtag?
Hashtag.
No, because then it's a hashtag about hashtags.
It's very meta.
Yes, but we're not going for meta. We're going for something that is relatable to the conversation, Mark.
Hashtag personal mission statement.
Hashtag personal integrity. Hashtag make a difference. Hashtag I'm a stand for ...
All the hashtags.
All the hashtags. I don't know. It's a really interesting topic to think about. Is, if we were starting a revolution, what would we call it?
The Customer Service Revolution. Hashtag Customer Service Revolution.
Yeah, I like it.
There we go.
Because the customer service revolution is not really about customer service as we traditionally think about it at the contact center. It is this personal brand, this personal integrity, and corporate integrity all coming to meet at that point of service, that touch point with the customer. And can we make that come alive and be real and be authentic and true and transparent and genuine? And so that is my challenge to all of you. And we would love to hear what you think and how you do it and what you see out there.
Yep. So if you're on Twitter, go ahead and tweet Dr. Natalie and WizardCast_pod, hashtag Customer Service Revolution, and let us know what you think about this episode and what your mission statement is. You can also, of course, go to our Facebook page. You can go to Natalie's LinkedIn page, or my LinkedIn page for that matter, or to the blog site.
Don't go to mine. You're not allowed to go to mine. Mine's off limits.
Mark, no one wants to see Mark's LinkedIn profile.
No, you don't want to anyway.
Or you can just go to thewizardnews.com and leave a comment on the show notes that, of course, no one's reading, so that's okay. Thank you, Natalie.
All right. Well, thank you guys. This was really fun.
WizardCast is produced by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, directed by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, technical administration by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, script writing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, audio editing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, our website maintenance by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, and our intern this episode was John Lamberson.
And you can be an intern too. Just follow us at WizardCast_pod on Twitter.
Or if you see us events and take pictures of us, share them on the social media, but make sure we tag us so we can add you to the list.
Have a joke, interview suggestion, or other comments? Just let us know. You can call and leave a voice recording at 608-492-0321 or email wizardcast@thewizardnews.com.
And we are going to do another idea exchange highlight. If you have an idea that you've seen on the idea exchange, maybe it's yours, maybe it's one you voted for, let us know.
Go to bit.ly/idea highlight to submit that idea to us.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WizardCast and receive our next episode automatically.
And please post reviews on Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, and share this episode. It helps others to hear what you just had to endure.
Once again, I'm Brian.
And I'm just hoping that they don't use the old jerky style of animation for this episode, where it's like you see the same facial expression except with the lip flaps and that's it. And there's not a lot of quality to it. The later years, it got a lot better where they were actually.
Have you seen our animation budget, Mark?
No.
We don't have any. I'm totally in the hole for this episode.
Well, clearly this needs to change, Brian. Where are we going to get this kind of money?
There's that bank just across the street.
Are you suggesting we rob it?
Here, I got some sheets with some holes in it for some reason. You take this one.
Oh,
let's just go.
Convenient.
I'm trying to figure out what my motivation here is, but I'm the sheriff. I'm an old sheriff.
You're a sheriff who didn't do his job, and a bunch of pot-headed kids managed to solve the mystery that should have been perfectly simple.
These pretzels are making me thirsty.
These pretzels are making me thirsty. These pretzels, they're making me thirsty.